All right, I'm going to do another deck tech this morning. It is morning, and I have a 2-year-old, so I'm just making these videos as I find some free time. So I'm a little bit raspy, still got the morning sleep in my throat a little bit, so bear with me on that. Today I'm going to do a deck tech for a runner deck, and this runner deck is basically just kind of like generic good stuff. I really like this runner deck. I like using it as a teaching deck, but it's also pretty fun to play. It's just kind of like generic good stuff without doing anything too crazy, but still pretty fun and consistent. So I always like to start with my rig or my program suite, I guess, because that's the thing every runner deck needs. You need to be able to break all the types of ice and deal with this problems that the corporation can throw at you. So we'll start with my decoders. I've got 2 decoders here. So we got Wizard's Book. Wizard's Book installs for 5, so pretty expensive, but it breaks code gate subroutines for 0. And then it's got a base strength of 2, so the stats on it are pretty good. But to raise strength, it does cost 2 bits to raise strength, so that's where it starts to get a little expensive on you. So kind of an expensive breaker, but it ends up being fairly efficient. And then we've got Code Cracker as my backup or my second, depending on what I'm needing. Much cheaper to install at 2 bits, but it is 0 strength. It also breaks code gate subroutines for 0, but you can raise the strength for 1. So I'll kind of, if their code gates are small, we'll start with a Code Cracker. If their code gates are a little bigger, I might come in with a Wizard Book to open it up. And then I've got my wall breakers. So I've got Jackhammer. A similar situation you're going to see here. Jackhammer, really low bit cost to install it. Breaks walls for 0, plus 1 strength. It is a noisy icebreaker, and in original Netrunner, noisy was kind of related to what Fantasy Flight era was with stealth. You could install resources that had stealth credits, and noisy icebreakers would basically absorb your reoccurring stealth credits as the downside to them. The weird thing, though, is that you don't have to play stealth cards in order to use noisy icebreakers, but there's some ice on the corporation side that interacts with noisy icebreakers. I think it's you can't be broken by noisy icebreakers or things like that. This is one of the few mechanics from the original Netrunner that I do wish it was enhanced a little bit. There's certain runner breakers like Jackhammer, which just felt really strong. There's the really notorious one being Pile Driver. It just, it's really good icebreakers. I think Pile Driver installs for 1, and the stats are better than Corroder on it from Fantasy Flight. So that's one thing that and there's I don't run any stealth cards, and so there really wasn't a lot of downsides to running noisy icebreakers. So I try to balance it out myself. Pile drivers are really, really, I think it's just a common or a fixed card. From fixed means cards that would appear in starter decks. There's fixed and vital. And this is my understanding. Fixed cards would always show up in starter decks, and vital cards, there was a pool of vital cards, and starter decks would contain certain selections from that pool of vital cards. So kind of just fixed was cards that you would find in a starter deck, and vital was cards from a pool that you might find in your starter deck, but they were deemed necessary to play, things like ice and programs. Anyway, so that's tangenting into the noisy icebreaker thing. So that's kind of one mechanic that I wish was a little bit different. But that's topic probably for another video. Anyway, those are my wall breakers. My sentry breakers, I've got 2 of them here. I've got Raptor and Black Dahlia. Raptors, again, you're kind of seeing a theme here. I've got a cheap one and an expensive one. Black Dahlia is way expensive, but it does come in at strength 5. So I think the idea is just it can get through, and 5 is pretty high in original Netrunner as far as ice or program strength. The brake ratios are really high. It costs 2 bits to brake per subroutine and then 2 bits to raise its strength. So you're probably not going to need to raise its strength a whole bunch, but 2 to brake is crazy. So Black Dahlia is there if, it's kind of my backup, but my primary sentry is going to be Raptor, and I love that art on the Raptor. It's just so great. This little owl, this glowing eye, so cool. Installs for one strength. It's expensive to break subs at 2 bits per subroutine, but just 1 bit for raising its strength. So similarly costed, but I tend to favor Raptor in most circumstances, but Black Dahlia's there is kind of my backup. I'm also not running a ton of programmer recursion in this deck, so sometimes you just get stuck using the program you still have access to. And I do have another breaker. It's kind of like a tricky breaker. It's an icebreaker that breaks for 0 plus 1 bit to plus 1 strength, and it comes in at strength 2, so the stats are awesome. But it just breaks any ice that can activate a trace. So if the ice does any traces, then this icebreaker. So it's kind of like a unique icebreaker that can either be useless in your hand or really save your day. So it's kind of a backup. So yeah, I think that's what seven icebreaker programs. And then another important part of the rig is a link card. So I'm running access to Arasaka. It's not the best link card, but I like that it says Arasaka. It references Arasaka. Cyberpunk 2020 fan. So any reference to that original lore is pretty fun. Again, it's not the best. Well, I guess it puts your base link. So for 2 bits, it puts your base link at 4, which is pretty strong. And then you have to pay 2 bits to keep raising it. So, yeah, not terrible. The other part of my rig is some hardware. So I'm running 2 Zetatech mem chips. Each one installs for 3 bits, but they give you 2 MU. So that's pretty nice. I also love when the flavor text does references the future that ever was. It's in 2019, sales dipped because of a rumor that the odd chip contained a miniature transmitter that sent the chip's data encrypted to the nearest Zetatech facility. I love that that's a dystopian thing. Wouldn't it be scary if this happened? It's just how all of our stuff functions now. It's pretty funny. Maybe it's how it functioned back then too, but funny. And then this is my one. It's my only recursion program protection card. It's a microchip backup drive. It installs for 0, so that's sweet. But whenever one or more of my programs is about to be trashed, let's say if I'm about to face check into an experimental AI like we saw in my last deck, you can basically save them onto this card. So instead of going to the heap or the discard pile, you put them onto microchip backup drive. Then for one action, you can bring the top card of microchip backup drive into your hand. So you can put them in the order of your choice. So if let's say I hit an experimental AI, 3 of my programs are going to go. I can be okay, which ones do I want to prioritize, and then order them how I want on the backup drive. And then, for one action, I can slowly bring those back into my hand. And then if backup drive, let's see, and it doesn't go away after, so it can kind of sit there. So even if you've done reload your programs back into your hand, you still have the backup drive sitting there. But if if they are able to blow up this hardware, then obviously all those programs would be lost that are hosted on it. All right, so that's the rig. We got some link cards, we got our programs, and we've got some hardware there. So then let's go to the next really important part of any runner build or Netrunner build is the economy package. So I'm actually rocking 4 score right now. And it's Sure Gamble and for FFG Netrunner. So this was the Sure Gamble. I like this. It's wearing a REM shirt. It's amazing. I also, it's one of those cards I really love the flavor text on, just because it seems so appropriate for life. But it's It's from Spider Murphy, who's a character from the Cyberpunk 2020 lore, and I think Spider Murphy's also referenced in the video game Cyberpunk 2077 too. Anyway, the flavor text says, if someone has consistently good luck, it ain't luck. I love that. It's just like, there's those people in life who's like, like my wife is this way, where it's like, oh man, she's so lucky, and it's just like, if somebody's consistently lucky, it's probably not luck. There's probably something else, like they're good at stuff. So that's true for my wife anyway. She's really smart and good at stuff. So that's score. Then we've got Lucid Dream Booster Drug. I love this one. This is freaking stim hack from FFG Netrunner. It's a prep. You play it for 0. You get 9 bits to spend during your run. Any that you don't spend are lost at the end, and at the end of it, you suffer brain damage, and that can't be prevented in any way. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna just mainline this run, and there's gonna be some fallout, but and I love that splash economy where it's like you can really surprise the corporation by being like, you know what, you thought I had no money, but now I'm rich and I'm coming at you. I love stuff like that. And then, you have to take some brain damage, which is always fun. And I don't have any protection about increasing my hand size later, so I'm only running 2. It's kind of like you just have to suffer the effects of the brain damage. Here's the rest of my economy cards. Okay. Loan from Chiba, super fun. Super splashy, but it's like a high risk, high reward. So you install it and you immediately gain 12 bits for 0. So she's like, oh, here's 12 bits. That's awesome. But at the start of each of your turns, you have to you lose 1 from your pool. Lose 1 bit from your pool. If Loan from Chiba leaves play, you have to immediately pay 10 bits or you lose the game. You may trash Loan from Chiba at the end of any of your turns. You may trash Loan from Chiba at the end of your turns. What's that? Okay, so that's how, So basically, it just so you get the 12 bits, right? That's awesome. But now you're really vulnerable because if this thing gets trashed, like let's say if the corporation gives you a tag and trashes it, you automatically lose the game. So that is very risky. And so, this card really incentivizes you to be like, all right, I need to get rid of this thing myself and trash it myself on my terms, where I can I have the 10 bits to pay back to it. And so, otherwise the corporation, once you put this down, you're rich and you can really hit the corporation hard for a turn. But now they have an alternate win condition. They're like, if I can trash Loan from Chiba, they just die. So yeah, high risk, high reward. Running 2, super, super fun card. And this is like the perfect Netrunner card in my opinion. Because it just creates alternate stakes and it's that high risk, high reward. Both players are immediately incentivized to interact with this card, and just super fun, in my opinion. Then we've got Broker. That the FFG Netrunner analog would be Katie Jones or Katie Jones, however you say it. The difference is that Broker is not unique, so you may have many of them installed, as many as you wish, and on each of your turns you can click it or do one of its actions to either put 3 bits on it or take all the bits off of it. So usually you're going to spend several turns loading this up till it's got 9 to 12 and then dump it out, so you're filthy rich. But having 2 of these or 3 of these going at a time rocks. So you can get rich really quick using your brokers. I only have 2. Then we've got short-term contract. This is Armitage code busting from FFG Netrunner. You put 12 on it, and then at your leisure, you can click it for 2 bits. When it's empty, you trash it. It installs for 1, so just that click compression. You're clicking for 2 bits instead of 1, and you can do that for 6 times per short-term contract. I love the art too. He's like a console cowboy, right? That's what they call him. So he's got his mouse in his holster, he's gonna quick draw it. Ooh, I'm so fast on the computer. I think that's so funny. So, yeah, 3 short-term contract. That's always a fun little card. And my last one is basically, it is Desperado, which was a console hardware out of the Criminal faction in the original the Fantasy Flight original core set. Desperado was like one of the best cards in the game for Fantasy Flight, and it's also awesome. It's also unique, so you only have one, but it's a resource instead of a hardware, and you just, I think Desperado, if I'm remembering, installed for 3. This just installs for 2, and you gain 1 bit each time you make a successful run. Freaking awesome. Like, that's gonna, and to install, this thing's gonna immediately pay for itself and probably net you quite a bit by the end of the game, assuming you're doing what you're supposed to be doing by making runs. So yeah, again, it's good. I love cards like that. It's good design because it's encouraging you to do the thing that the game is about, which is making runs. So it's like, oh, make runs, make money. Pretty good. So that's the economy suite. I think I'm right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 economy cards. Awesome. Love it. Lots of economy. Okay, then the second, I guess the third part of a good runner deck is lots of draw. Is the corporation, you're going to always be drawing cards automatically, and sometimes you want to slow down that rate. As the runner, you want to just be drawing through your stack. So lots of card draw here. So I'm running 4 of If You Want It Done Right. This one is like, you look at the top 5 cards of your stack, you put 1 in your hand, and then rearrange the rest in the order of your choosing. Super good. Just dig through the 5 cards, grab the one you want, and then rearrange your next card draws. Yeah, fantastic. You can kind of forecast future turns or future actions, and dig for a card that you need right now. It's 0. Yeah, there's like no downside to that. But the other thing that's nice is a lot of time, like, oh, well, it'd be just better to run like, cards that just draw me cards. The reason this is nice is sometimes, you don't want to just fill out your hand and have to discard cards and be left with the over full hand. Like, if I'm running tons of Jack, and I do run a couple Jack and Joe, which is just Diesel, draw 3 cards. Diesel being the FFG Netrunner equivalent. But sometimes you just want to pull 1 card into your hand instead of multiple, so you don't have to throw cards away. So that's where that card can be really nice. 2 Jack and Joe, just draw 3 cards. I mean, you could do probably, this could be your whole draw. You could do 7 or 8 of these and call that like, hey, I've got my draw figured out for the deck. I personally think that that's boring to do it that way, so I'm just running a couple. Sometimes I'll run 3 or 4, but just 2 in this build. Temple Microcode Outlet. This is like a tutor. It's 1, search your stack for a program, pull that you have to reveal it to the corp, and then bring it to your hand, and then reshuffle. So again, original Netrunner really, and I think Netrunner in general, like they give you a lot of ways to tutor out your programs, because that's like, if you're playing as the runner, like you have to be able to consistently get programs, and if you can't really fully play the game. And so I think original Netrunner probably is a little bit heavy-handed, especially with that resource short circuit and stuff like this that just lets you grab the program. With FFG Netrunner, because that stuff was in faction, usually like Criminal had the special order card, which lets you basically do this, and I think it was 2 to play. It's a little bit, I don't know, just balanced differently, where it's like, all right, well, if I want that consistent, go dig for my program, self-modifying code was out of shape, or, you had to kind of port it in from a different faction, and so I do that design of like, this, because there's no factions, I can put this in any deck, and I can put short circuit in any deck, which is fine. I still really like this design, but, there's, again, no downside. And I think you have to show this one to the corp so they can kind of see what's coming. But I think with tutor effects, being all so powerful, in any game, like they probably should have come with maybe a little bit more of a downside. I don't know. And then 2 Mantis, again, this is the same as Temple Microcode, tutor for any card you want, but it can be any card, but it is 2 more bits to play it. So, go get your link card, go get that, special resource or another prep card that you need. You're not bound like Temple Microcode locks you into, you get to find a program, which is probably the thing you need the most. But Mantis, maybe you need to go grab a Lucid Dream drip to, I don't know, or like a multi-access trick. All right, so that takes us through like the bones of the deck. We have a rig, we have a way to break, we have our icebreakers, and we have some card draw. So now the last section of the deck, and this is kind of how I deck build too. I start with my programs, I make sure I have money, I make sure I have card draw, and now your last few cards you add, or what I call tricks, or like, what's your deck gonna do that's tricky? So this is just generic good stuff. So mostly it's multi-access cards. So executive wiretaps, make your run on HQ. If they're unsuccessful, you get 2 additional cards. So you see 3 cards out of their hand instead of just 1. So like legwork for FFG Netrunner. I don't know if you can tell, but I was a big time Crim player, the blue faction for Fantasy Flight Netrunner. Just, so I feel like every time I'm building a original Netrunner deck, I'm like, oh, this is like totally criminal faction style. That was always kind of my play style. So 2 executive wiretaps, multi-access. Oh, bumped my camera, sorry. Multi-access is always good, just about. I mean, unless you're fighting a lot of net damage, kind of crazy. Multi-access is, this really stings if you hit a hand that has like a couple setups in their hand. So setup is that 2 net damage corporation trap. 2 custodial position. Same thing. It's the R&D one. So I'm not recalling the R&D, but it's hit 3 cards from R&D instead of HQ. Same 2 bits to play it. It's a prep, make your run. If it's successful, hit 2 additional cards. There is totally a Netrunner analog to this, and I just can't. I think it's like Maker's Eye or something like that. So, yep, multi-access, just good stuff. Classic Netrunner strategies. Hitting multi-access is good. Inside Job. Yep, another quote-unquote criminal card from original Netrunner. Yeah, so make a run, you automatically pass the first piece of ice you encounter. Just running 2 of those, but yeah, Inside Job, always a great card. Always surprises the corporation. Bypass an annoying piece of ice, or great early game. Like, I don't have time to set up my rig. I'm just gonna go bypass that, quandary or whatever they have out. So that's locking me out currently. So nice little trick there. This, I think I said this is like one of my favorite cards in the game. I just love this art. Like, this is just dripping with like, this is like dripping with original Netrunner vibes here. Doug Schuler, awesome. Yeah, I want a playmat of this. So 1 MU programs installs for 0. It says, whenever you are about to access cards from R&D, you may first choose to cut any number of cards from the top of R&D to the bottom of R&D. So this is awesome. But like, it's kind of awesome by itself. Like, let's say you've got a pretty good lock on R&D, and like you're able to consistently hit it. Maybe you're gonna run it twice in a turn. You go see the top card. It wasn't an agenda. It was just an ice or an operation you didn't like. You can be like, all right, I'm going to run R&D again, but this time before I access, I'm going to use Microtech AI interface to cut 1 card down. Or let's say I hit R&D with the custodial position, none of them were agendas. I go back in, I can cut the top 3 down. So it basically lets you see new cards out of R&D. Where this gets really good is there are other cards, which I don't have in this deck, which just allow you to like look at the top card of R&D. And that's where this really sings, is you can, I'm going to peek at the top card of R&D, and then I'll decide to run it and, cut it down, before I access. So kind of a tricky, way to see cards you haven't seen out of R&D. So really fun. Love the art. It's mostly in there for the art, if I'm being honest, but it's a really good effect too. And then running 2 Taxman. So this is from the Proteus, the 2nd expansion. It's a virus. 1 MU installs for 3. And kind of punishes HQ. So it says, after each successful run on HQ, give the corporation a tax counter. Every 2 tax counters causes the corporation to lose 1 bit at the start of each of their turns. So I don't think I've talked a lot about viruses and how they worked in original Netrunner, but and I do think that this is one of the improvements that Fantasy Flight does too, is they changed how viruses function. Like in Fantasy Flight era, viruses, you're primarily putting virus counters on the virus card itself to track, which makes, then you can quickly reference, in original Netrunner, like you have to give the corporation different types of virus counters. And like if you're running a virus heavy deck, it's like, okay, well now they've got a tax counter and they've got a whatever counter, and like they have different types of virus counters attached onto the corporation. Flavor wise, it makes sense. It's like, you're putting viruses into the corporation's forts and, into their HQ. But from a tracking perspective, like if I have, basically more than one, if I have different types of viruses as a corporation and I'm having to like remember, okay, this pile's this type of virus, this tile might, it can get confusing. The other big difference between old Netrunner and Fantasy Flight Netrunner is, in order to purge virus counters in Fantasy Flight, you had to burn a whole turn. 3 consecutive actions must be spent to, unless you had more actions, you're playing HB and you somehow have more actions through like biotic labor or something, you're spending your whole turn to purge virus counters. In a original Netrunner, it just said the corporation must forego their next 3 actions. So what you could do is be like, all right, first clicks, install something, second click, play hedge fund or accounts receivable, and then third click, I'm going to go into my purging. So I'm going to burn that click and and so I'm going to purge right now. I'm getting the effect of purging immediately, remove the tax counters. But then when the next turn starts, my next 2 actions are burnt. So you could split your purges across turns. I haven't really played with that mechanic in original Netrunner to have an opinion on how that is. Like, it obviously seems way more powerful than Fantasy Flight's version, where it's like you got to commit a turn to purging. That's probably better design-wise, but I'd have to play with it more in original Netrunner to see how I feel about comparing the two, of spreading out your purges across turns. In theory, it seems interesting and fun, but I'd have to actually play with the mechanics too. Similar to how I played with Trace. Like, everybody said, oh, Trace is way better in FFG Netrunner. I think they're kind of equivalent. And sometimes I actually prefer original Netrunner Trace mechanics. But I haven't played with enough virus builds to. Anyway, so yeah, Taxman, that was a long tangent, but Taxman just burnt tracks as their HQ. Even if you just get 2 counters, like, if you're, at the start of your turn, if you're losing a bit, like, that's gonna get annoying. If you get 4 tax counters on the corporation, like, they're going to purge. Like, you can't just automatically lose 2 bits at the start of your turn and let that. The other reason I just love the art on Taxman. Just freaking, I love that high contrast. It's like floating through wilder space. Super cool. Okay, well, that was a runner build. So my 3rd deck tech for original Netrunner, 1996 Netrunner. And yeah, thank you for watching. Hopefully we'll get the other decks up soon.